Good morning, everyone. How are you all? Good. So thank you for coming back from yesterday. If you guys were here during yesterday's presentation, I really appreciate that. We have some folks here today with me that I feel really fortunate to have. They're very special people from, I'm gonna get, I think I can do this actually, hold on. Okay. From the Metlakatla Indian community, and they're on Zoom, and also here from Pawnee and Hoopa tribe, Hoopa Valley tribe. First, Metlakatla, can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So today is kind of going to be this organic process, and I first just want to start out by saying thank you very much to you guys all for being here, both on site and then the virtual folks. What I'm going to do is kind of quickly go through a couple of slides from yesterday that will just review the Planning Basics 1, just a couple of very quick slides. And then I'm going to introduce the projects that I've worked with these folks on. And then we're going to take it from there because, and I want to introduce everyone here just in a second, because all of these folks and the folks on Zoom are like the people on the ground. We have leadership, we have staff, we have managers, and these are people I've worked hand in hand with in developing plans, but their planning experience and history goes way beyond me. So I want today to be about the projects that they've worked on and planning to going from beyond the planning basics to the actual apply it at the tribal level. So first I'll introduce the folks here, and then I'll have the folks from Metlakatla introduce yourselves. I'm going to minimize my screen, Metlakatla, so then you can turn on your cameras if you want to when I introduce you. But first, I'll start with Mr. Monty from the Pawnee Nation.
Yeah, Monty Maloff from Pawnee Nation, the Director of Division Natural Resources and Safety.
I'm Chris McCrae with the Pawnee Nation. I'm the Transportation Manager.
Linnea Jackson. I'm on the Hoopa Land Commission. I'm the chair of the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, and I'm General Manager for Hoopa Public Utilities.
Lois Risling. I work for the Hoopa Tribal Realty Department.
I'm really lucky to have such great clients to carry me. It's awesome. So the folks from Metlakatla now, here they are. Online is, I'll start with Janelle, and we have Gavin and Dawn, just to introduce yourselves, and then I'll go back to the presentation, and then we'll come back to you all.
So Janelle Winter, Metlakatla Indian Community. My official title is Grant Coordinator, Invasive Species Program Director, and yeah, Dawn, go ahead.
Dawn Pringle with Metlakatla Indian Community, Forestry and Land Resources Manager.
Gavin Hudson was with the Metlakatla Indian Community when we worked with Amy. I'm the former Planning Committee Chairman, former Chairman of the Electric Utility Board of Directors. And next is Councilman David Boxley.
Good morning. I'm David Boxley. In my day job, I'm an artist, which is actually how I started my relationship with Amy, but I'm now on council, chairman of the Finance Committee, and co-chair of Metlakatla Power and Light Board of Directors. Thank you.
Hi, Councilman Boxley. I didn't see you join. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you, guys, for the review from yesterday. So yesterday we defined planning as this formalized process that involves future thinking, controlling the future in terms of being able to better anticipate future conditions based on the planning activities, and then also integrated decision making We reviewed the different levels of stakeholders and the different categories under those stakeholders, from your primary, your secondary, and tertiary, both involving folks from your general public, your members, your non-members, off-reservation members, the special cohort, the kids and the elders, going out to them and involving them. We discussed that. And then we looked at the importance of planning and the related benefits in terms of helping you to ensure organizational continuity, help you to better exert authority and sovereignty over both your lands within your, your existing exterior boundary, but also those original lands that have, or resources that have been lost that you want to re-exert those authorities over. And also to address, economic benefits and to mitigate against disaster, respond to, and hopefully prepare for that. And then, there's a whole long list of other plans, but at the end of the day, they're all kind of have these fundamental components that are, that tie all of the plans together, no matter what type of plan it is. Sorry, I'm looking at, there we go. We also addressed, what the skills, knowledge, and abilities require you to be a planner, interpersonal communication skills, complex thinking and problem-solving skills, research skills, the ability to both work with a team, lead, and to be assertive when you need to, and kind of be able to feel that out and know when to do which, right? Because there's always a time for kind of all of those different, so being able to judge that. And then the different factors that guide planning, we went into this in detail yesterday also. Tribal law, federal law and policy, overlapping jurisdictions, other plans that affect the planning area. These are all things that should guide your planning process, especially in the cases where you're in these multi-jurisdictional areas of checkerboard lands and such. But also in instances like up in Metlakatla, they don't have checkerboard lands, but they have a lot of resources that are managed under different, that they're kind of working alongside, I should say, between the state and the feds. So the planning process, we looked at that preliminary planning. Remember, planning to plan, that process that everybody kind of doesn't like because it slows down the process, but at the end of the day, it's really important. Gathering and analyzing data, identifying problems and issues and concerns. You're really looking for patterns at that point to be able to understand your existing conditions and to better formulate and communicate your desired future conditions, developing that vision, developing goals and objectives and policy, and then really, generating and evaluating options. And again, depending on the type of plan, this process is going to happen differently. So, for example, with the Pawnee Nation, I worked with them. I developed an infrastructure management plan, or a strategic infrastructure plan. With the Hoopa tribe, I helped them to prepare a land use plan, which is one element of their larger, what they call general plan. Whereas with Metlakatla, I helped them to prepare a comprehensive land use plan, as well as, an emergency plan, strategic plan. There's other, the integrated resources management plan, the one that I discussed yesterday. All of those plans are different, and we had, I want to say the approach was different, but it wasn't. You have like kind of this systematic approach, but all the information that goes into it is different. So making sure that you're able to generate the information you need to, evaluate your options and make decisions at the end of the day. It's all, again, I'm going to emphasize that, it's all about the process, which is what I was, trying to emphasize yesterday over and over. So now I'm just going to kind of briefly just show the table of contents of the plans that I worked with these folks on. And just like with yesterday, the reason why I kind of, went over those components of their plans, I went over the components to show that, these are components, this is part of the planning process, but at the end of the day, these plans belong to these folks. They don't belong to me, and the process belongs to them also. I was very fortunate to be part of that process and to assist, but these folks are the people that are on the ground, they do the work, and they're helping to prepare the plan, and then they are helping to implement it at the end of the day. So first I'll start with Metlakatla, and then I'll describe their plan, and then go on to Hoopa and then Pawnee, and then I'm going to kind of open it up to them. So with the Metlakatla Indian community, the most recent plan I assisted them with, which is what we discussed yesterday, was the Integrated Resources Management Plan. So it was a very long planning process. It was highly complex. The end result is like a 500-page plan, but I think it's a really solid plan, and I'm excited to, let them kind of tell you about that, because they were involved. Like I said yesterday, so we kind of went into this with the scope, figured out, and then once we were in the preliminary planning process, it was clear that we needed to kind of pump the brakes and do an expanded preliminary planning process to ensure that we're covering all of the resources and all the ways that they want to use their resource for both future use and current use. So we kind of not repurposed the scope, but we reevaluated that scope and expanded it, and then carried that out through their work plan, and just a ton of research and back and forth. They have a lot of plans there. So the original idea was kind of to try to, house these plans and make, prioritize management decisions based on those. But we kind of expanded beyond that, and I'll let the tribe discuss that with you. But they were, heavily involved in reading, all the different drafts and being part of it and saying, oh, this needs to be included, or no, you didn't capture that right. Or, no, we need it this way so we can use it, for whatever purpose. So again, emphasizing that planning basics too goes beyond me into them. We pass me and we go to them. So with that plan, it was long and complex. But I had, and I had the background with them. I'd been working with them since 2015. In January, I worked on multiple plans with them, been in a lot of different situations with them. So I had that kind of, background and that relationship already established with them, which made it nice. With the Hoopa tribe, I came in, this is the first project that I worked with the Hoopa Valley tribe on. It was new, so I didn't have that established relationship, but I was really fortunate that we got to roll our sleeves up really well, quickly. The planning director, Jacqueline, she couldn't be here, unfortunately, but her and her team and the land commission down here, Linnea and Lois and the rest of the land commissioners, we just got in there and pulled our sleeves up and just got on it, and it was great. And we did that that planning week, that super intensive week-long planning week, and that was great. So again, their process, their plan and process was different, but it had the fundamental components. And again, I want to emphasize, so this land use plan is an element of a larger general plan, or larger, what Metlakatla calls their comprehensive plan. And then with the Pawnee Nation, this again was my first working relationship with the tribe, so I didn't have that background like I had with Met, but I assisted them in preparing an infrastructure plan. And I worked closely with the staff and managers and leadership, and it was really interesting to work with the two groups. Again, highly committed, all of these, and the other reason why I wanted all three of these tribes to show up, and I'm so honored and blessed that they did, is because they are the way clients should be. They are fully engaged. They are committed. I am really good at what I do, and I know it's probably shocking because I sometimes can't communicate it, but I can't shine unless the tribe shows up, unless they do what they're supposed to do, and I cannot emphasize that enough. It is so hard to do a job when leadership doesn't show up, when staff doesn't show up, when the community doesn't show up, and I get it with community, but I don't get it with staff and with leadership, but it's a part of it, and I understand that. But I do want to commend these folks, all of these folks. They go above and beyond their call of duty in terms of developing plans, preparing for plans, reviewing plans, continuing to review. Hoopa is, in that process right now. We meet on the weekends. Like, these people are down, like, they want to do this. They're in. And that's why I, feel so blessed to do the work that I do, to be able to support folks like this. But again, in terms of Pawnee, they were there, staff was working hand in hand with me. I am not an engineer. I don't know transportation, I don't know these areas. So that's where I have to work with staff to make sure that we get this right. I don't know the cultural aspect. That's why I have to make sure we work with, Lois and the cultural folks on the ground to make sure that we get this right for you guys. Pawnee was different. I do want to show this because, and Metlakatla is familiar with this. I've done a lot of implementation stuff for them. But with the Pawnee tribe, this infrastructure plan, so many different people are using this plan that the main plan, that big plan, I don't know, it's a couple hundred pages, and it's really only meant for their task force, for funding for, the higher level. This is what we need. And then you have the desktop strategy guides for your different departments. So we kind of broke it down, and that was again a part of me working with their staff, their executive director, me realizing that, actually one plan is what you paid for. I did all the others, for free, because that's just how it should be, to make sure that they can utilize the plan, because not everybody's going to be able to utilize the primary plan the way that they should be able to do that. So these are kind of the projects that I worked with all these folks on. And again, I'm just kind of briefly introducing these projects because their experience in planning is way more than mine. You have the boots on the ground. So I really just want to bring this from a Planning Basics 1 to a Planning Basics 2, where the people that are on the ground doing the work are involved. Let me try to get Metlakatla back up on the screen.
Hi, I'm sorry if this interrupts
Hi.
anybody talking, but those of us on Zoom have lost audio, just to let you know. We can't hear what's going on.
Oh no. Gavin, you can't hear me? Uh-oh. Huh. I think, okay, so we're going to start with the folks here, and maybe we can get that figured out for them. Oh, that's too bad. Okay, so anyway, for everyone that's here right now, would you guys like to start with your plan, in terms of your experience with, your infrastructure plan, and also, moving from beyond just that infrastructure plan, but in terms of action, putting it to use, but also the process of it.
Sure. Like I said, we had meetings initially with leadership to get their goals and objectives of the infrastructure. Of course, a lot of this comes out from ILJA, the bill, the different, infrastructure stuff that's in that. So Amy had the meetings with leadership and their ideas, and then they came down to the directors and managers and the staff to have the meetings and what goals and objectives we would have, and then we kind of met together and meshed those goals and objectives together, realizing, you know, that the higher level meetings with the leadership, you know, they might have pie in the sky, you know, ideas where it's not, you know, able to be implemented at the tribal level for one reason or another. And so that's where the staff and the directors and managers could tell you, well, you know, it's more likely we're able to do this with the staff that we have, or it's going to take additional dollars to be able to get that implemented and achievable over multiple years. You know, just because you get the money one time, you still have to make it manageable and sustainable. So we had those conversations. So currently we have an infrastructure and resource management task force that's going through our infrastructure plan. We're having planning meetings once a week to discuss the NOFOs and what projects we're going after. Currently, we're looking at some water and sewer implementation. We're meeting with IHS officials and everyone there at the tribe to do the next steps on doing this. So, but on this task force, you have myself, Monty, Natural Resources Group, our planning director, and our executive director, you know, in these meetings. So at least we have those high-level meetings to have that pre-plan that Amy talked about before we actually get into the main planning and going after those NOFOs and those infrastructure dollars. And then once we get those done, a little bit of my background, you know, in transportation, you know, we have to do in transportation, we have to do a long-range plan, we have to do a TIP. So we create a 20-year plan and a 5-year plan, and then implementing projects, you know, the project management, we decide on how we're going to do an RFP with those. Recently we did 13 projects, horizontal and vertical at the same time, and we used a construction method called CMGC. And so we had 4 different funding sources, and we did all these projects all at one time with one general contractor and one design team. Similar to a design build, but you had this one set of contractors and designers. But anyway, it really showed us on doing something like this, if you have a lot of projects, a lot of infrastructure things going on, that you can do a lot and do a cost savings so you don't have mobilizations and everything. So we're definitely at that pre-plan part of it to go after these infrastructure dollars and these projects.
Thank you. That's great. Do you have?
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I know working in natural resources, primarily with US EPA and Department of Interior, you know, planning is just the nature of what we do. And that's probably what made us be able to hit the ground running when we took on this initiative and the strategic plan. You know, we had a lot of the information and data in place, and so there's really no secrets or barriers. We were able to pull together, I think, a pretty decent plan.
I agree. I think you guys have a great plan, and you had a good foundation. And for a tribe that doesn't have like a ton of, you know, plan, you have excellent. The plans that you do have are just solid. So I think that yeah, and their team, their on-site team, the planning staff and tribal council or the business council is just amazing. And again, this group, when I first started with them, it was like I first met with council, and then I met with the tribal staff, and then I'm like, I can see kind of like this, you know, there was just a disconnect, a small disconnect between the two. So I thought, oh, I'm going to bring them together. So I brought, you know, staff and the council together, and that was super effective, I think, because, you know, then they both were able, like Chris said, you know, council has these really, you know, these big ideas, but on the ground implementation, it's probably not going to work, you know. So being able to have the staff there that has the courage to speak up, right? Because that's hard too, to say, actually, no, this really isn't going to work, or yeah, it can work, but we're already way overtasked, and we need additional bodies and we need additional training, and that also helped the council to say, okay, we need to invest in workforce development, but we also need to invest in doing a, not a hiring plan, what did I call it? I can't remember, but a recruitment plan, and making sure that, current staffing, is paid what they should be, where, that needs to be reevaluated, and future staffing, so it really helped to kind of bridge those gaps. Like, we can do this, but we need the extra resources. So council, we need those resources. And now we're sitting in this room together, and it's kind of like this facilitated process. And I think that helped, maybe, I hope, in the long term, but bringing everyone together. So I don't know. Melikali, can you still hear us?
Yep, we can hear you guys
Okay,
now.
good. I'm going to move on to Hoopa, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay.
So with Hoopa, again, this, I only worked with them on the land use plan, and, this is their plan, this is their story, this is their process. I was part of it, I feel like, I've been part of it the whole time, but, this is yours, so.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Lois Risling. As I said, I work for the Realty Department. I worked many years as a college administrator and professor training teachers. And then my husband, I retired, and my husband and I moved back to the reservation to his childhood home. And we wanted to make some changes to that house. And so we started asking around, like, what can we do, what can we not do? And the county said, oh, that's out on the reservation. You can do anything you want. I told the guy, I want to build an ammunition plant and live in part of it. And the guy goes, well, you have to check with the tribe. So I went over to the tribe and said, we want to make some changes to this house. One of our concerns is that the house is located not too far from an old original Kahenai village, as we call it. It's a Kahenai village. Kahenai is our spirit people. And so we were concerned about that. But the guy says, well, we don't do that. Go see this other department. Well, after 5 departments, I told my husband, nobody does it here. So we can build anything we want and do anything. And that's kind of how we start getting into the whole concept of land use and what does that mean. I got, it was unfortunate, but one of the person who was doing realty passed away, and they needed somebody else, and they, Linnea worked in that department at that time, and our director, and they said, well, why don't you come and help us? Come half-time and help us, and that's how I got into realty. Part of the responsibility is to develop a land use plan, and we actually have an ordinance that says the Hoopa tribe will have a land use plan. And I'll tell you this, I put together a box of proposed land use plans. The Hoopa tribe has done about 12 separate land use plans. They've gone all the way through the process, gone to our legislative process, gone out to public hearing, come back, been presented to the council, and the councils have voted 2 of the 12 plans in my box, because I threw them all in a box, voted down those land use plans. Then what happened was the county said, if you have a land use plan and it is approved by your council, we will give complete jurisdiction over any kind of land within the reservation boundaries to the Hoopa tribe. Doesn't matter if the person's a non-Indian, a white person, a non-tribal member from another tribe, a Yurok person, a Karuk person, whatever. If you have a land use plan, we'll turn that over to you. So that was kind of a motivation on the part of our councils. But our councils are interesting. It's an interesting animal because it changes every year. Half the council goes out then we get a new crop, and then half council goes out. And so we're always in an election mode, and it makes it very difficult to operate. The other thing, the 12 plans in my box, and I haven't said this out loud to Amy, she's number 13, so if you're a Christian, you're probably like going, oh my God, she's number 13, but it doesn't matter in Hoopa, because there are not that many Christians running around. So when we needed a plan, we needed to put together a plan, we hired a consultant, we'll call Consultant A. Consultant A's whole purpose was to make sure we were in compliance with the county so that we could exercise what the county was offering us. The other principle that was operating at the time was, because our tribe doesn't have an outside source of income, we've got limited funds, we had to generate money in order to fund the departments that work with those, with land use. So we had to come up with some kind of, so the process required generating money from the tribal members. That plan was it was written and it was submitted, and it didn't go over well. And so we said, we can't work with this. We have to find somebody who will work with us and listen to us. Even if the person doesn't quite understand what we're saying, we can work around that and make it work. We needed to find somebody who could help us translate our version of what land use was, because the Hoopa people have a land use version and plan that's as old as the Kahanai. The Kahanai lived in Hoopa before we did. We're a lucky tribe. We live in our Aboriginal territory. I can point to the old Indian house where my great-grandmother was born. I can say that's my junta. I'm descendant from Met Dildon, the place where the boats land. I can say that, I can point to it, I can walk to it. My husband is from a village on the other side of the river. That's how come I could marry him, because we were from both different sides of the river. We weren't going to be relatives, blood relatives. He's from a different village. He can point to his house. My granddaughter just had her coming of age flower dance ceremony in his family's house. So we have land tenure, we have land ideas, and we wanted that put into our plan. Instead of writing a plan that meets the standard Western concepts of land use, we wanted to make core and central our land concepts. So the river is very important to us. The Trinity River is very important. It's important because we eat from that river. We drink from that river. We clean ourselves from that river. And we do our ceremonies in that river. It is more than just a navigable river or a wild river, as the federal laws define it. It is the essence of who we are, and that needed to be captured. So my granddaughter, when it's her responsibility during her ceremony to run and bathe in that river, and she is of power. That's how we say that. She is of power, and she bathes in that river at 7 different spots. We have to capture that, because I don't want Linnea putting her intake valve right where she has to bathe. She cannot bathe where they fish, where the men fish or the women fish, and set her net. We have to protect those things. They must be the essence and the core of who we are. I am enrolled in the Hoopa tribe. My husband is enrolled in the Hoopa tribe. Our children are enrolled in the Hoopa tribe, and our grandchild is enrolled in the Hoopa tribe. My parents were enrolled in the Hoopa tribe. My grandparents were enrolled in the Hoopa tribe, and my great-great-grandparents are. So we are vested. We are part of this land use plan. And it's important that we make this plan reflect the essence of the Hoopa people, not just what the county needs to make their land use plan, not just the mechanics of it, that we have to do this. Because we're in our Aboriginal territory, we're small. We have about 12 square miles. There's about 3,500 members. But we know things. We know where we're from. We know whether we're from the south end or whether we're from the north end. We know what village we're from. We know where our house is. And we maintain that house and that village. So when we're putting together this plan, we're doing it for different purposes. We're doing it for the county because even though there are laws that say you have jurisdiction, we go around and around in internal fights with the county. And because we're a public law 280 state, we go around and around with the state. So we have to put together a plan that reflects not only state requirements, county requirements. Be aware, we have non-Indians who own property on our reservation, and they are concerned about building, they're concerned about land use because they actually own property. We have tribal citizens that we have to be aware of, and we have to be aware of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Indian Health Service and the federal government. So that plan has to incorporate all of those things. And one of the things is we have to be able to explain, because all these plans, these other 12 plans, they never mention allotments, they never mention assignments, they just talk about fee properties. And one of the things about fee properties on our reservation, it's not only individual fee, it's tribally owned fee. And that's a whole nother can of worms. So all those things have to be incorporated in the plan. And the planning commission, our planning commission, wanted to make sure those things were there so that it addresses allotments, assignments, and fee. And that's just not for the county or just for outside people. Our own people don't understand this. So it needs to be in the documents so they understand what this means. And it needs to refer to the rules and regulations that govern those things, because you have federal law, tribal law, and then you have some county ordinances. And all that has to be considered when you're writing this. The other thing is that Hoopa people have changed over time. We call the Indians who live in California outside of our Hoopa area, we call them Kunyayan. That means acorn eater. They ate acorns. They gathered acorns. That was their principal food. There's like 52 varieties of oak trees in California, and some tribes are neighbors over the hill, Pit Rivers and Wintons, they'll eat black oak. Hoopas are a little bit persnickety. We'll only eat tan oak. If we get really hungry, we'll eat a black oak. I have friends in Southern California, they eat blue oak. So, but we're all Kunyayan. We're all acorn eaters. That's our place. But when Dawes Act came to Hoopa, they said, can't eat those acorns. We're going because they were stripping the trees for their tannic acid so that they could tan furs and stuff. And they were, oak is for furniture building, and it burns really well for fires, and they were like cutting all that down. And they said, you're gonna all be farmers. And so they gave us all 4 acres or 20 acres, and then they said, put a cow on it, put a horse on it, have a little truck garden. You are now all farmers. Well, we have generations of Hoopa children who grew up to be adults, and they think they're farmers with their little 4 acres, or it's less than that, 3 acres. I said, hey, you ought to go meet some of those people from the Northern Plains. They got more than 4 acres. But we think we're farmers, and we're trying to incorporate those farming elements into our cultural constructs now. But cows mess up water systems. And we have not only the Trinity River, we have a lot of creeks, and we have a lot of springs, and those cows are not user-friendly. Same thing with horses. I barely tolerate cats, so the other 2 things are like really pushing. But we have to deal with that grazing, because now, because of the Dawes Act, we have generations of children who are adults who think that's who we are. They can remember orchards of apples. And now, I just saw in a document, and Linnea can speak to this, where they actually listed the crabapple or something as a traditional native Hoopa food. And I'm going, oh, no, well, it depends. You know, are you talking 1200 native, or are you talking 1850 native? Or what kind of, so we're wrestling with those kinds of issues. It's absolutely important, I cannot stress this enough, that if you're going to maintain who you are, you have to have those hard discussions, and you have to put them in your plan, because in my mind, I envision some little Hoopa kid living in Pawnee, fell in love with some Pawnee guy, but enrolled in Hoopa, living over there, and what they have are these documents that they can look at. And who we are, the essence of who we are, has to be central and core. And you need to have a person helping you, such as Amy, who's willing to say, well, I don't quite get that, but you can explain it to me. It's important. If I can't explain it to her, how am I going to explain it to somebody else? Thank you for your time.
So again, I'm Linnea Jackson. I wanted to talk about some of the essence that Lois projected. Some of those plans that she talked about were written by, let's call them outsiders, or not from a tribal perspective. So when we were originally reading through those, there's language in there that said like the Indians and kind of described us like that. And it was so funny. It's like a joke now, but those are the type of documents that were not coming from a tribal perspective. They didn't assert our jurisdiction. They didn't show our values. They didn't show what we wanted to do within our reservation and our Aboriginal territories. So what we're trying to work on is asserting tribal jurisdiction, having that come from a tribal perspective, and then look at our history of who we are, saving those cultural resources, but also looking to the infrastructure and future growth that has to take place. So how do you balance, protecting cultural resources when you have a need for housing, or you have a need for expansion? You need to expand water lines, the things that she said, but we need to protect these sacred places as well. So it's a fine balancing act of looking at past, present, and what our future growth needs to be. We found it hard to gain public engagement. We had a short time frame, so we held in-person meetings and meetings over Zoom. And sometimes it's really hard to capture public input. And then when you're passing a document, people will come back and say, well, I didn't have a chance to, have input. So I think the critical engagement of public is essential, so they can feel invested and feel like they had a part in playing that. Because we don't just want to do a plan to have a plan. We want it to guide what our future development is and be able to use that as a tool and a resource. So I think that's our goal here. We're painstakingly going through word by word by word. We have several hour meetings, a couple of times a month. We have a meeting on Sunday when I get back so we can try and get these through, because next we have an ag plan and we have, climate adaptation and other things we're working on. So most of us have a full-time job, so it's like right after work we're, going head into these plans. So I guess what my recommendation would be was have it come from a tribal perspective, have it reflect your values and asserting power of the tribe and what your future needs are. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Linnea and Lois. I think that, the Hoopa experience has been really interesting for me. I learn a lot from, all of the projects. I feel just so fortunate that these folks let me into their home, and these are confidential discussions and close, and, they all let me be part of that, and I feel really fortunate. But, you can't get these plans without people like this and the folks that are going to talk from Metlakatla in a minute. You can't end up with plans like this without them. And I think, that's where the important part of it is. And I'm like taking me out of the kind of equation, and I appreciate Lois saying, you need someone like that. And you need someone that's a technical support that has, experience and has knowledge of these different areas of law and these different complex kind of environments and what's required at different levels. But it can be a member. It doesn't have to be someone like me. It just has to be, you have to have a team. You have to have a good group of people that are willing to work on it, carry it out, and something that's going to last over time and continuity across administrations. And I think that's where, Alaska, this group here from Metlakatla Indian community, I worked with them for 8 years. They've been through a lot of different administration changes through those years. And, there's consistency. I've seen it. There's strong continuity, even though even at the table, there'll be wildly different kind of perspectives at the table, right? You have different ideas, but they are united and they're strong, and especially when it comes to hard decision making, they will be united, and that has carried them through, and since I've worked with them, it's very evident. But and I know, even though my time with these folks is shorter, but I know that I can see it. I can see continuity there because they're doing the work. I mean, and when Linnea says, they're there at night, and on the weekends, and I'm there to attest because I'm there with them. They're putting in overtime hours to do that, but not getting paid for it. So, again, that's just really important. Okay. Metlakatla, can you hear us still?
Yep, can still hear you.
Awesome. Thank you guys for being here. You can't see us, but we can see you. So if you're willing to show your beautiful, shiny faces, and if not, I get that. But thank you for being here, and I'll let you guys go. So go ahead, Janelle or Dawn.
I would like to kind of echo a lot of the statements that were made by the ladies from Hoopa as far as having the right consultant makes all the difference in all the land. We have plans in Metlakatla that sat on shelves and didn't nobody any good. And when you pulled it off the shelf, you look at it and you're like, somebody invested an incredible amount of money and time into writing a document, but it's obvious they never visited the community. They never held public or any kind of outreach events. They didn't walk on the beaches. They didn't climb Yellow Hill. They didn't look at the power plant. They weren't physically present in the community to really get a sense of what Metlakatla Indian community is all about. We are a very unique tribe with unique dynamic as far as how everything is organized and how the community operates. The history is its own history. It just doesn't fit any kind of pigeonhole. So you can't plug what you would think Kelly Indian community looks like into any other template. And so that's why it is so incredibly essential that Metlakatla advocates for itself in the planning process. We had literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of plans from the 70s and 80s that, while they were very well written, clearly did not show that there had been any kind of community outreach, any kind of engagement of the community in any kind of a real way. And so once Amy came to the island, we were working with Division of Energy during what was actually a crisis here on Annette Island, where we had a drought in a temperate rainforest, which was unprecedented. We had to define what that was as even a real thing with the National Weather Service. It's a whole thing. So she got to be here in the middle of a crisis and to provide the right words to define it so we could write our emergency declarations, so that we could complete an emergency preparation plan while in the middle of doing the land use planning process. So we were in the middle of doing the land use planning when it all hit the fan, and we're all trying to figure it all out and what was going on next. So one of the biggest takeaways that I continue to advocate for, even when we're hiring consultants for anything, is that sovereignty of the information. Metlakatla has to own it. Metlakatla has to have a say in how it's written, what information is recorded, what information is allowed to be publicly accessible, what information we choose to share. So the need for a plan is great, but it's only any good if the plan comes off the shelf and becomes useful in life. And so we've been able to use the plans that we've worked with Amy, and she's a good example of someone who's listening and not trying to insert their own personal color into the actual document. So I really appreciate a lot of the comments from the ladies from HOOPA, because they really showed that they've been burned or had those bad experiences. And so now they're able to pivot and say, well, this is what we want, and we're going to own it and try to get to where, make sure these plans represent what Metlakatla or what your community needs. I'll let Dawn or Kevin or Davey go.
Thank you, Janelle, for saying that, and I appreciate it. And again, I want to emphasize this isn't about me or about a consultant. It's about the planning that goes on the ground. But she brought up. I was like thinking as she's talking about the emergency experience, because we're there doing a land use plan, and then all of a sudden they have this legit huge emergency on multiple different levels, big thing. But I remember we're doing this plan. They don't have any monitoring, stuff for the lake. You can't. No, there's no lake level sensors. There's nothing, right? We don't know how much water we have or what we don't have. We're kind of at the very beginning of just a mess. And I remember working with the tribe on this emergency plan, and we're trying to figure out, okay, when are we going to engage these different levels of emergency? And the big indicator for the tribe when they know that there's an issue going on, even though they didn't really ever get up to the high lake, was if there's not water coming over the waterfall, we kind of have an issue. And that just kind of was known there, right? And I didn't really know this until I was working with the tribe. And I'm like, when are we going to engage from, and I can't even remember what level it was to what level. And everyone's like, oh, when we can't see the water coming over the waterfall. Okay, that's legit. That works for me, And I go back and I'm, putting together a plan, and all the engineers almost have a freaking heart attack when I tell them, no, it's all right. We're gauging this by the water not coming over the waterfall. And I mean, I went toe to toe with these engineers. They're like, you can't do that. Absolutely, I can do that. They know their island. I don't know their island. You don't know their island. But I think to me, that's just one example of an outsider saying, how you need to do your plan versus an insider, and it's worked. So at any rate, thank you, Janelle, and Dawn. I'll let you go from here. And Dawn is she's in the forestry department. She led actually the integrated resources management plan project. So, and she's a member and just a dear person.
Thank you, Amy. Everybody, I'm really shy, so I'm going to keep it brief, but I'm very supportive of all the help that Amy has given us in developing our plans. She helped us see and come to fruition with our culture and involving it in our plans and getting everybody's ideas and incorporating everything. And she listened to each and every one of us and helped us have those hard discussions and get everything down in writing, and helped us to make those tough decisions for our tribe. And so I really think it's important to be able to have someone like that when they are doing the planning for you, because they help you see other viewpoints and options, and just make it. It just really was a blessing to have Amy there for us, to be the mediator and help us to, like I said, make those hard decisions and get everything down in writing. And yeah, I don't know. It was great. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate that. And again, thank you very much. But she's, all of these people are the ones that are, the plans that I do for them, it's them. I'm just putting it together and I'm there facilitating the process. But they're the ones, all these people are the ones that are doing the planning. They're, I'm just the basic one. They're basic too and way beyond. So, Councilman Boxley.
Good morning. It's morning here. I don't know where you guys are. You guys in California?
We're in where are we? Temecula, yes. Wachanga.
Okay.
We're in beautiful. We're beautiful. Supposed to be sunny in California, but it's not. It's beautiful. It's just not sunny.
I've seen all the rain that they've been getting. I know that's been tough, but also good at the same time. Crazy world we're living in these days. I came into this relationship as just a member of Metlakatla Indian community. Initially, I was invited to some meetings as an artist to put in my 2 cents on some conceptual concepts that were possibly being put into some of these plans. And it was right at a time where my generation was starting to be involved meaningfully at the council table. But it was during a transition between generations. And I was thinking about what I wanted to say here this morning, and the best compliment or endorsement I could make of how important planning is and what Amy was able to do for us is that in the efficiency that came from good planning, ideas that maybe had been shelved or not listened to for a period of time were able to be heard, and made it so that somebody like me who maybe would have wanted to stay out of tribal politics because of the roadblockish nature of the past, those roadblocks started to go away. And it was, Amy's right, it was a combination of strong voices at the table saying what we wanted, but showing us that planning can create good positive change a lot faster than you'd think. And it was one of the factors that got me to the point that I thought, well, okay, I'm gonna run for council. And it has been while always challenging, it's been exciting to watch us move in a more positive but progressive and speedier direction than we had in the past. And I do believe that's a huge part to do with planning and being ready to go. You know, Janelle has been a key in that, and her working relationship with Amy has been fantastic. And I'm really glad, Amy, that that's going to continue for us.
Thank you.
Working with you has been a joy, and I look forward to what we get to grow. So I guess what I mean to say by all this is that when things are running well, when you're planning for the future, opportunities arise that wouldn't have been there before. Whether that's, you know, people wanting to be involved or progress actually getting made. All these things are crucial, and yeah, it's serving your people is an honor and privilege and a heavy weight, but having somebody who can help guide you, not lead you, but guide you through what you need to do is a big help. So thanks for letting me be a part of this today, and I'll hand it off to Mr. Hudson.
Thank you, Councilman Boxley. Thank you, Janelle and Dawn. And thank you, Amy, for inviting me to take part in this panel. I wanted to kind of take another step back to Metlakatla getting a strategic plan. And it hadn't had a strategic plan in 20 or 30 years. And it showed. When President Clinton in the 90s converted the Tongass Forest into the Tongass National Forest, kind of eliminated logging overnight. Logging and fishing were the two primary economic drivers in Metlakatla. So bam, half the economy right there. It wasn't long after that when fishing started to decline. And then it was kind of declining steadily, and then it started declining rapidly. And there's the other half of our, or the other third, I suppose, of our economy. The remaining third would be federal grant funded jobs like our clinic and the tribal government. That paints a pretty bleak picture. It was kind of felt like anybody, you know, running for council would want to. They're just, you know, it used to be go in there and take as much as you want. I mean, that was what we talked about in our household when I was growing up at the dinner table. Was all the corruption. That's what I grew up listening to from my parents, all the corruption, and they just get in there, take as much as they can before it's all gone. By the time I came of age and started having opinions, everything was all gone. So it was kind of like anybody you left was just kind of picking over the bones of a once abundant and kind of wealthy at the time. Now it's kind of desolate and budget always running in the red. There was always deficits. There was always cutbacks. And that left Metlakatla in an extremely vulnerable position, very vulnerable to the slightest change in the kind of environmental and ecosystems that we had come to depend on, the slightest change in the federal government's approach to how it works with and funds Indian country, and the slightest change in international markets, because a lot of our fish was sold on the international market. Well, all of those things got disrupted um, in a huge way. So, because Mount Cat was so vulnerable, it was just one hit after the other. And then it just becomes kind of a clash of personalities at the council table and lots of arguments. There was kind of this approach that I observed from the one council members who had been there for a long time that, you know, good leadership meant to tear down any idea that anybody had, just poke as many holes in as possible. And that's really discouraging to anybody coming up who has ideas, new ideas, fresh ideas. And to run up against a wall like that is very, very discouraging. Amy came along and to help the tribe develop a strategic plan. First one in ages. First one in my lifetime, really. And the public was invited to take part in the development of that in a really meaningful way. So it was an opportunity for some of us who had been discouraged at the council level to kind of go in around this other side, which was the planning level. And I realized when I was sitting there amongst a room full of stakeholders of all ages from all different kinds of backgrounds, some tribal council, some staff, but that my ideas were well received, that I was able to help shape, not only, you know, contribute tidbits here and there, but I was able to help shape the entire direction of the planning process just by speaking up, just by using this voice that's been given to me by the Creator, a voice that I have an obligation to use. So discovering that I am in fact effective in that arena, and I don't mean to pat myself on the back. I'm just, if there's anybody within earshot, get involved and see if you like it. See if you can make a meaningful contribution, because there's a pretty good chance you can if you care, if you just genuinely care and your heart is for the people. And so I decided to run for council, and I won with 82% of the vote. It turns out that the community was just as hungry as I was for new leadership, new ideas, a fresh direction. That doesn't mean that it wasn't a slog and a fight. I served 3 terms on the tribal council, and every day of those terms was a battle. It was a huge battle between the establishment and the new up and coming leaders, and it was really a battle for the vision and the direction that the community was going to go. Times were tough, and that made the battles even more intense. But what the planning process did, I discovered as a new incoming planning chairman, is that there's politics involved, but there's not a vote. There's not a decision-making apparatus necessarily when you're bringing stakeholders together. So planning was a really, really potent way of bringing people to the table, people who, I described it as battle. Battle means you have adversaries. So you're bringing in parties together that are very adversarial. And some of those tribal politics can get really ugly, really toxic, really personal. But what planning does is it gets to not look at each other, but each other to look towards the future. And then that's where we have a shared values. Their grandkids are going to grow up in the same environment that my generation's children will grow into. On that level, we were able to find common ground, and there was no intentionally setting aside our differences. But setting aside our differences was a prominent byproduct of the process. And when Amy was describing earlier about, got to have be able to work collaboratively in a team, but you also have to know when to step up as a leader. Those characteristics of a planner are absolutely true. And another requirement that I would suggest to you and add to that is that their leaders are servants first and foremost, but they also have to have a wide angle lens. And that's hard to do when your entire world has been shaken by all these major, you know, like continental shifts in our economy and our way of life and policy and funding. All these things are huge setbacks, and so having a wide angle lens can be very difficult because there's funding shortages, there's fires, literally and figuratively. And so when the tribal leadership is just constantly jumping from putting out one fire to the next, the policy becomes less about the future and more about now. And handling emergencies after they've already occurred is way more expensive, costly, not just financially, than actually looking ahead and seeing that freight train that's headed towards you, and getting ahead of it and making a plan to deal with these things ahead of time. So, there's only so many people who are involved. There's only so many hours in a day, but managing what has happened, managing what is happening, those are important, but they can't be everything. The third component of that has to be having one eye toward the future and bringing in stakeholders to be humble, but also to have that pride of your heritage, to infuse those values, the values of your ancestors, into these plans that are working towards the future. We, Indigenous people, have to live in two worlds. As you all know, we live in this modern Western colonized world. But we also need to hang on to our identity, our language, our history, our ceremony. But at the same time, make it work in this, federal bureaucracy. And these aren't easy things to do, but they are made easier, no matter how difficult the process is, if you can all agree on a plan together. That collaboration, excuse me, that collaboration, you can start to suss out new and upcoming leaders. Like, hey, I never heard her or he speak before, but boy, they sure got a brain in that head, or they have a real heart for the people. Maybe we should start cultivating new leaders. Maybe we should learn how to listen better. And so all those outcomes, side outcomes, are just as important, I think, as the actual finished document. I know that it was for me, and I saw it for other people who participated in it as well. You just heard from Councilman Boxley. He was an artist and a carver, and then got involved through the planning process. My story is similar. I graduated from culinary school. I was a cook, and then suddenly I'm on the council dealing with an integrated waste management plan, trying to manage what do we do with all the garbage in our municipal burn dump that's making us sick and polluting our environment. I learned how to stir fry and make filet mignon and a bechamel, and here's a climate change adaptation plan you got to work on. You just never know where you're going to find the next leaders. You never know when you're going to find the next staff, like Janelle and Don. None of these things could happen if you didn't have the soldiers on the ground who were putting their nose to the grindstone to take all these agreed upon plans and make them a reality. And I heard one of the ladies on the panel before saying you can't just have a plan to plan. Boy, that's absolutely true, especially when we're spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on a plan, and then just have it sit there. You know, that $150,000, I could think of 27 different things on just right off the top of my head that could have used 150,000. But when it goes into a plan, you're planning for the future, and we learned a lot of really good lessons working with Amy and engaging in the planning process. Yeah, it's time consuming. You're getting into nitty gritty stuff sometimes, but also that's the place to infuse your values, like I said before, and look toward the future with hope and aspiration and an open mind and an imagination. And those are the parts of politics and governance that really fill my heart. And it's really rewarding to approach government in that way. And Amy, I think someone should get her a cape because I think she's a superhero. She was right at our side through several different, existential emergencies, and her quality of work is incredible. It's the gold standard as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
And that's based on my real world work with Amy, working side by side with her when I was an employee of the tribe, and while I was a member of the tribal council. We made huge strides forward. We dealt with major, incredibly difficult problems we had never even imagined. And you start to tear open, get into this, and then you're like, oh, we knew this emergency was bad, but we didn't know it was this bad. And then all of a sudden, it just gets uglier and uglier, and it's kind of like when you replacing a house and repairing part of a house, and you pull off the wall, and then it's way worse than you think it is. And all along the way, while I was, tending to panic, Amy was like, no, we can do this. You can do this. And it was as much her work product as it was her just encouraging us, and her knowledge of Indian law, her knowledge of her abilities in program analysis, being able to distill all these sometimes opposing viewpoints, sometimes wildly different perspectives, and distill it all into a coherent thought and idea and picture, really saved us, our community. And I know she'll want to push back and say, no, it was you guys did the work. And that's true. It was both of us. But we couldn't have done it without her. Amy, I always tip my hat to you, and I give you a lot of credit for standing with us through all those challenging things, and really, frankly, being a mentor to me. And so that mentorship also builds internal capacity. So I would suggest to you, anybody who's listening, that if you decide to hire consultants, Amy or anybody else, I would strongly recommend that a component of your contract with them, with a third-party consulting entity, a big component of that is mentorship. That they're not doing all the work out of your sight. That you're right there, or someone in your staff is there with them, learning how to do this stuff, because it really does build capacity, and that capacity just gives you more and more strength and capability to achieve your goals. So, and I've gone on for a long time, so I'll just stop there. And I appreciate the chance to share my thoughts and experience, and thank you again, Amy. We really should get you a cape.
Thank you so much, Gavin, and everyone from Alaska. And again, this was not intended to be like a big commercial for Amy. That was not the point, but I do thank you guys very, very much. And I can't emphasize enough, you know, Metlakatla's work and Pawnee and Hoopa's work. And with Metlakatla, you know, I think the planning, you know, I was reflecting as you all were talking and kind of had forgotten about all of these things that we went through together. And I mean, they really did have a lot going on at once, like a confluence of just every bad thing that could come at them, went at them, and they have persevered, and it's just been so interesting to see them grow too as a community. And that's, I think, that I've been able to see that grow, and the multiplier effect of these plans in terms of funding and for their programs and for their tribal governance and kind of where all that has taken them has been unbelievable. So thank you guys very much for your time here, and thank you for the participants. Do you all have any questions, or I don't know where we're at with time? The participants, do you have any questions for the folks here or online? Okay. I'm sorry, it's sweaty.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Elliott, and I'm here from the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. Because of my personal dealings with the planning department, just like Lois, I chose to get involved with our tribe, and I'm on the Land Planning and Protection Commission now. We oversee the planning department. So I know who to go to when I need help, and I'm still doing the same thing. I moved away when I was a teenager. My mother went to Oakland, California when I was very young as part of the BIA relocation program. I was born and raised, though, in Pendleton, raised by my grandmother till I was a teen, and then moved to Oakland. 30 years later, I moved back home, trying to build a home on my property that was left to me by my mother. Has been challenging for 2.5 years. I would like to know, I'm not sure how large everyone's tribes are. We're a small tribe. But how many of your tribes employ your own surveyor? Do you contract with a surveyor? That is what every tribe needs. We need to push for that. Every tribe needs to have your own surveyor. We can keep ours busy. Our own planning director told me in a meeting 2 weeks ago, well, the Department of Economic and Community Development is backlogged like 6 months with waiting for a survey for a small project. I said, yes. Now, if we had our own surveyor, we could lend him or her to DECD, and they could pay us. Each department would be transferring money back and forth like we do now, and their salaries would be paid. I just can't emphasize that enough. We have tribal members with 50 acres, 10 people on there, but one person doesn't want to pay for the survey. So they're stuck not being able to build, or they have to lease their own land, which is irritating as hell. Even though my cousins won't charge me, or they'll charge me a penny, but it's still the process of having to have everybody sign when everybody should be signing that final plat so that everyone has their own lots. So that's just something I wanted to ask, was how many have their own surveyor? That is one position that needs to be added to every budget. It's almost budget time. Throw that surveyor in there, lend them out to different departments, lend them out to a non-Indian, and their salaries are paid.
Surveying is a interesting thing. For the Hoopa tribe, we're only about 3,500 members. 12 square miles, we're not huge. But the tribe has a law that it passed itself that says you cannot give out any land unless it's surveyed by a state-certified surveyor. Then you add on top of that the federal CFED's requirement that you have to be federally schooled in order to be a surveyor. Surveyors are not cheap, and they have to have a buddy. So you're not just hiring a surveyor, you gotta have a buddy for the surveyor to hold whatever it is or shoot at or do whatever you're doing. So you need two folks at least. You need high-end equipment. They need a truck, and if your reservation's like my reservation, it's got some steep parts, some mountainous parts, and so you need one of those little machines that you can ride around on that look like motorcycles with four wheels. You need one of those. So surveying is something, and tribes, when they have these requirements, and there's a reason for the requirement, because you have to be able to describe the property, whether you're breaking up an allotment, or what they call partition, or you're taking a piece of fee property and surveying it, it is an issue. One of the reasons why we're getting, and this is my scientific word, screwed by the federal system is because surveying is not done within the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It's done from a different office. And so I know some great mind made up this OSG stuff and this BIA stuff and this BLM stuff. And the only persons getting hurt in this are the tribes and the Indian people. It's a bureaucratic system that's designed to screw us. Yep.
Thank you, Lois.
Help us less.
We have a question too over here.
Good afternoon. Is it still morning or an afternoon? Anyway, my name is Cassandra Atencio, and I went to the Southern New Indian Tribe, and I'm the Thipo. I think one thing about plans that come out is who writes them. You can have a tribal employee, but that perspective, like you mentioned earlier, is always missing. And it's from instead of a tribal perspective and layman's language, it's always the academic. And sometimes if you're a tribal member, you don't understand or follow that flow. And I think a lot of it also is wordsmithing. You know, Europeans, that perspective and how they talk about, they'll say a shaman or a medicine man or something like that. And for us as a tribe, we don't utilize those words. We have people that take care of our ceremonies for Sundance, a Sundance chief, a Bear Dance chief, and also practitioners of their spirituality. So I think it behooves whoever the planner is in that planning prospect, in that planning process of writing, must also utilize the words that that tribe uses to identify itself culturally, and looking at cultural resources where those places are, because sometimes it's not just about the site, it's about what you utilize for those ceremonies. A sacred site, yes, those grounds may be there, but it's what the people do before, during, and after that also makes it important. Meaning, where do those families go to pick their plants for that ceremony? Where does the family go to wash in it? Because not every family, for our tribe, not every family goes to the same place. We don't have a big ceremonial, it's the river, but different families along different rivers or ponds or lakes to cleanse utilize it differently. And I think that's part of the process that's missing in the planning stages, is actually adequately utilizing your tipos and your cultural resources from those tribes and your elders to implement that into your plan. Thank you.
I want to tell you that that's very important. The Planning Commission made this Planning Commission because of our recent experience with a previous consultant where I was, because I just do this, standing up saying, you can't say that, or you shouldn't say that, or that. And they'd go, thank you for your opinion, and then push you out the door. But wordsmithing is very important, and Linnea can tell you I drive her crazy, because I'll write something and then I'll put a word in and then I put like 4 other words because they might mean something else. And that's why they made the decision to, as a group, to go over each page and each paragraph and read it and say to each other, what does this mean to you? What are you saying? And we're kind of like you. We don't have one grounds that everybody goes to. When you're doing the flower dance for a girl, you do it in her house. It's in her house, and you insacred that house, and you bring the kahina in to dance with you, and they have bathing spots for that house. So those things have to be captured. But how they did that, and it takes a long time and a big commitment, is they've decided we're going to look at the words in the document, and we're going to try to figure out if they capture what we're saying. And there's some information, that we're not going to put in there, but there's other information that we are putting in there. Something would seem simple. Here's 5 boat launching areas on the river. Well, are those 5 spiritual, ritualistic boat launching places? Or are those a boat launching place that Lois Rislin likes because somebody took all the gravel out of the way and I can now go put my float down the riverboat in it or something? So, but they're making those decisions, and that is very important to be able to do that.
Yeah, it is important, and I can tell you too, as the person that's there kind of in the background, right, and I'm there for support, and if there's a question in terms of, jurisdiction or whatever, then I'm there, and I'm there to make sure that the changes are made, but I can tell you that they're doing that, and it's a conversation that they haven't maybe, haven't had the opportunity to have, or maybe it's even been an uncomfortable conversation up to that point, but that the importance of doing that, making that connection and that plan yours, and I can tell you too, as the white person, I know I always get the side eye. I'm like, yep, I work exclusively in Indian country. Yes, I look like this, and yes, I'm not Native American. I know it's really weird, but and things, the universe is great to put me here, and I feel really fortunate to be doing the job that I do and to be in those rooms. And I can tell you, as the person that's not Native American, as the person that's there for the advisory and technical assistance, the process with Hoopa has been different, because typically it's on the front end we'll kind of go through all of this together, like with Metlakatla and Pawnee's experienced this too, where we kind of develop the language together. I draft it, I send it, it's like this back and forth throughout the process, and at the end there's still a lot of that too. But with Hoopa, just because of circumstances, the project was different, and I drafted the plan on the front end. We reviewed it a couple of times, and then we went in and we're reviewing it word by word, page by page, section by section. And I can tell you, it's been really interesting and a learning experience for me to have that, because I'm writing it from the best perspective that I can, from a technical perspective, and then we're going back and forth, and then having them change it, and I'm thinking, because here I am thinking about the jurisdictional and the consequences of these languages, right, on a non-cultural level, what are the other, thinking about the jurisdictional and, all the other areas. So it's been interesting to make that happen, but I think, and I'm sorry, I don't know, but I did want to point out just the importance of those kind of, medging, because medging, I just invented a word. But having that, because at the end of the day, these documents still do have to serve a legislative purpose, both at the tribal level and sometimes at the federal, and sometimes at the state you're meeting requirements and in other instances. So these plans need to be able to satisfy a lot of requirements, right? And you're writing for multiple audiences and you're writing for multiple reasons, and to be able to get the most use out of those plans, both your return on investment. I know like Janelle and I talked about this some years ago, like, geez, what is the return on investment on all these plans? So you're writing it for return on investment, but you're writing it for jurisdictional authority and to be able to exert that authority. You're also writing it to maintain your culture and your beliefs and make sure that those are documented. So it's like a lot of moving parts and that's again why everyone needs to be involved and why all of these people are like rock stars. I mean, they're awesome. So anyway, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.